Feeling good, feeling great.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And welcome to the National Cooking Program. Again, you're here with Maddie.
And Millie.
And tonight, because it's Friday night, we've got a special treat for you guys. We are going to be making lovely homemade pizza with our own tomato sauce and then a nice fresh salad on the side with a balsamic dressing. For those of you who have been cooking with us since Monday, it's the same tomato sauce that we started with.
And you're also a quarter of the way through now.
Yeah, we've had our full 5 days, or tonight's the 5th night, so we've got another 15 ahead of us. I hope you've been enjoying what we have been cooking so far, but tonight will be a special treat for you guys, and we love pizza as well, obviously. As a nice little change of things, we're actually going to be swapping sides, and we'll see how we go with that.
Shake things up a bit.
Yeah, shake things up a bit. For our bread to even get started, or our dough, the base for the pizza, the first thing we need to do is set ourselves up for success. So number one, you're going to either boil your kettle or boil some water on the stove, because we need to heat our ovens. That will create a warm environment for the dough once it is mixed. So get that going as soon as you can. Get all your ingredients in front of you. You should have your oil, your yeast, your salt, and your flour. But the other things that you should have just in case, because we are going to be mixing by hand and it will get very messy, is a little bit of extra water than what the recipe calls for. And you want it to be pretty warm, like warm to touch, not so hot, but a little bit warmer than your fingers. And just a little bit of additional flour as well, just in case your dough you mix it a little bit too wet, but also just to help you get the sticky stuff off your fingers. So set yourself up for success. You're going to put a bowl or a thick, like a deep tray in your oven, because that is going to help us prove your dough later on.
For our water and just for our bowl to rest on.
So we'll need some boiling water, we'll need something to hold the boiling water in your oven, and then something that you can put your bowl on when we do eventually get into that proving stage. So hopefully you've got all that on the go. We've got our water boiling. As soon as it's ready, you can take a pause and just pop it into the oven, because what it will do is create a nice like warm air, and that will help that dough to prove. And I'll go into proving once we've kind of mixed it and we get started.
And just to stress, your oven is turned off, but we're just putting in the boiling water to kickstart the proving. So it's a nice, warm, moist environment for the yeast.
And that's the same kind of reason we're using warm water as opposed to cold water. If you had a relaxed night and you were just chilling about at home, you don't have to use warm water. You can use cool or something along those lines, but we want to kickstart that yeast, because yeast is a fungus. And fungus thrives and grows at, well, body temperature, but kind of anything above 28 degrees. So we want to get it to 28 degrees as quick as we can to get it move on. So in terms of your ingredients, you should have all of the things listed. And like I said, a little bit of additional water and a little bit of additional flour just in case. So you're starting with your bowl of flour. I will say if you have a glass bowl, it is good to use, just because it's really good to show you later on when it is proving that there's bubbles on the bottom, and that lets you know that the yeast is working. So we've got our yeast and our salt.
What sort of yeast have you got tonight, Maddie?
We have very fast dry action yeast, or instant action yeast. That is the fastest dry yeast you can get on the market, and it just means that you don't have to, a lot of recipes will say you have to dissolve it into a bowl of water and wait 15 minutes and have it bubble on top, whereas this one, we are just going to throw it straight in there, and that warm water that we have will help to activate that.
But this also, it's not boiling water, is it? So it's just sort of, what temperature would you say that is?
I would say just above lukewarm water. If you're aiming for an exact degree, 30 degrees is fantastic. But if you stick your finger in there and it feels the same, or a little bit warmer than your body temperature, so what your finger feels like, that's a really good temperature to go by. So we've got our bowl of flour. We want nice strong flour or bread flour. We are using Shipton Mill. They make a fantastic strong white flour. The reason you want strong or high protein, high gluten, bread flour, pizza flour, they've all got additional protein or additional gluten, and that's what helps you to create the strength in your bread. If you didn't have that high level of gluten, you'll find yourself with a bit of a sloppy mess later on. Those flours without the high protein are usually what you'd use for your cakes or your biscuits, whereas if you're mixing bread or something similar, you really want that strong flour because it will help to hold your pizza together later on and create that gluten. That's what we'll be working on later here. In terms of your mixing, we've got our bowl with flour in it at the moment. We've got the yeast in there as well. We're going to pop our salt in, so kind of getting our dry ingredients in the bowl. And you can just give it a little bit of a mix with your finger if you'd like. The main thing is, at the moment, we're about to get our hands very, very dirty. So if you don't have all your bits and bobs close by, get them close by. The one more thing that you might need is a plate or something to cover your bowl with, whether it be a tea towel. We're going to use a dinner plate here. Anything sustainable, try not to use cling wrap. It's just going to be wasted later on. So use a dinner plate or a tea towel if you can. And now we're going to get into that filthy mixing stage. So first thing we do, all of your oil. Not just a little bit, all of it to start with. We're using olive oil. You could use rapeseed oil as well. You don't need too much flavor from it today, so it's dealer's choice on that one. All of your oil is going right in there. And then the recipe calls for, to start, 250 ml. So we're going to go and measure from a little bit of excess water, 250 ml. And we know that this is a very good starting point, but we might need a little bit more later on. So go ahead, pour almost all of it in, 80-90%, but just leave a little bit in the bottom, just in case something's happened. Maybe you have a little bit of excess oil or you have a little bit less flour. You can always add a little bit more water once we start mixing, but it's very hard to take it out. So go, like I said, 80-90%, leave a little, just 10, 15, 20 mils in there. And then from here, our finger is going to be like a dough hook. We're basically going to stick it in the center and kind of scrape the side of the bowl, always rotating your bowl and just bringing everything into the center. So I'm consistently rotating my bowl, and this finger is kind of just scraping the edges, bringing everything into the center, always coming back to that center kind of pit there. And what that will do is make sure that you're getting all the dry ingredients that aren't touched yet. And here we've kind of got what looks like a mess, basically, but we need to decide now, before we start kneading, whether it needs a little bit more water or a little bit less water. For me, this looks pretty dry, right? So I'm going to add definitely the rest of what is in that jug there to start, and I'm even going to add a tiny bit more, just in case I need it, because it's really hard to add excess water in once you've mixed it into a ball. It's much easier to add it in at this stage. You can always do it, but it's much easier at this stage.
And you can see Maddie's only using her one finger, so her other hand is still clean, so if she needs to grab anything, if I wasn't here, she can still do it with one clean hand.
That's a baker's secret. You always keep one hand clean. Because again,
Answer the phone.
Answer the phone.
Type out email.
Talking about just yeast being a fungus, so you kind of want one clean hand because this one's covered in fungus. So again, I've added that little bit of extra water. I'm kind of going to continue that same motion, and I am using it as well just to scrape and clean the side of the bowl. You'll notice it's all kind of coming together. And we are going to make our final decision about the water. I've just found a big lump of flour, so I'm going to add just a little bit more. I personally have probably added, on top of the 250 ml, maybe an additional 60 ml, let's say, something along those lines.
And our water's come up to the boil, so I'm going to pour it into our oven tray so that can start warming up. But the oven is still off.
So we've got our dead oven or our off oven with a little bit of boiling water, and you can see that steam. That steam is what is going to help prove our dough later on, or in literally probably about 5 minutes, 5 to 10.
So gently put that back in.
And then shut that. Okay. And then from here, I've added what I think is that last little bit of water. And we are now going to bring this together into a nice little dough ball. And we're going to add a tiny bit more water. You'll hear a lot of bakers say, the wetter the better. Because usually your water is, one, it helps to disperse flavor. It gives it a really moist crumb. But it also helps the yeast to move through your dough. So if you have a little bit more water, your yeast is going to move faster because it finds it easier to move through the water than it does the flour. So I'm going to say a little bit more. A little bit more. We don't want it to be unmanageable. We do still need to make it into a pizza. We do still need to flatten it out on the tray, and we need to knead it as well. So we don't want it to be a sloppy mess. You can save that for when you're practicing again tomorrow night and making pizza for your friends.
What would you do if you made, you know, your hand just slipped?
And you added too much? I would drain it back out.
Okay.
If you add a little, like way too much in excess of water, you can add a lot of flour to kind of try and soak it up, but then you also have lost your ratio with your yeast and your salt. Whereas if you put just the tiniest bit too much water in, you just put a little bit of extra flour in just to
so
kind
just
of dry
like
it out.
Seasoning, you just add things incrementally, and that way you're never going to over egg it. You can just keep it in control.
If you're worried about your control with your hand, just find yourself a little a cup and just add in, you know, 15, 20 mils at a time. There's no stress there. So we've got what looks like a dough, kind of, but it's pretty messy, right? And at this stage, it's pretty sloppy and it doesn't have any strength or any gluten developed yet. So that's what we were talking about when we were talking about strong protein, high strength flours. We wanted to develop some gluten, and that's how we'll get the shape of our pizza dough later on. So I've been pretty good. I've still just kept my one finger dirty. I've got my handy Jeffrey, but if you find you've got dough all over both hands, a really good way to get off is actually just dip your hands in your flour and just rub it off like that. And that's at any stage tonight, because we are about to dip this, completely tip it upside down on the bench, everything there. And you can see it's a bit rough. I can still see a little bit of oil, a little bit of yeast, a little bit of everything. But this next process, the kneading, is going to clear all that up and make a nice smooth dough. So we've got our dough. It's looking a little bit worse for wear. It needs some love. The kneading process is completely up to you on what you're comfortable with. I'm going to show you a few ways. If you need a little bit of flour on your hands, you can also use a little bit of oil, pour some on your bench and just pop your hands in like that if you don't want all this dough on your hands. You're going to use the palms, which is the strongest part, and you're basically just going to push it, smear it wherever you like, everywhere, and then bring it back together. And what that will do is the stretching and the bringing it back together is what creates the gluten. It strengthens those proteins in the flour. That's one way. Pushing, pushing, pulling, pulling, all coming together, always pushing out and then coming back together. The other way is you slap it down. This is Roz's favorite. You're going to basically doing that same thing. You've had a hard week. You need to work it out. You're slapping it down and you're folding it over, and you can see that is a really effective way. Can you see how already that's becoming a tight ball? It needs a little bit more love, a little bit more slapping. The other way, I see my hands are already quite dirty, is you're going to kind of use just the tips of your fingers. You're going to slap down kind of half of it and then fold it over. And then rotate it. You're going to slap down half and fold it over. And you can see already it's only been 1 minute here on the bench. I'm smearing, I can pull it back in, always smearing and pulling back in. Or you've adopted the Roz approach, which is the slap it down. Is that it's already coming into quite a tight ball. It needs a little bit more time, and the best way to check your dough or your ball is after many minutes of something like this. Keep on slapping, keep on pushing, keep on smearing. You can use double hands, smear it all the way across, bring it back in.
Get
anything you like.
In.
Get your best friend, Jeffrey, clean up after you if you've got it. And at this stage, I know for sure that a lot of you are going to have really, really sticky hands. I'm used to handling dough. I know not to touch it too much. I know not to stick my palms in, but I know almost 100% of you have got dough all over your hands right now. Dip it in the flour. Just bring it off a little bit like that if you need to, all over your dough, and pick it all up again. And the easiest way to test, we're testing for gluten. We're testing for the strength of your dough, because what the gluten will do later on is it's going to trap the air bubbles that the yeast has created. If you don't have a strong dough or you haven't developed your gluten enough, all those yeast bubbles that are created from your warm water will actually be released into the air, whereas we want them trapped in the dough. We want them to create bubbles within the dough, not released into the air. So eventually, you've been kneading for 5 minutes now. You're going to keep on going, but you're eventually going to try and bring your dough into a tight ball. And the best way to do that is you kind of have it on your bench like this, and you bring all 4 corners or 6 corners of your dough in together. So you're making a really tight, kind of looks like a dumpling like that. Flip it over, tuck all your ends in.
You make that look so easy.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest part. But usually after about 5 minutes on the bench, you're going to give it a good push, and if you can see, it's bouncing back quite readily. I've got myself a really nice, tight dough ball. That instant bounce back, if you push it in, see how it's immediately coming back. That means this dough is very nice and strong. It can always do with a little bit more, but for me, this has enough strength to hold those yeast bubbles in that I was talking about. So don't stress too much about going wild in the kneading. You do need to give it, you do need to give it a good time on the bench. I will say about 5 minutes. But what you want to be focusing on as well is making sure that when you can bring it into that tight ball, that it does have a bounce back for you, because that's a good test. So I would say focus, once you feel like you've got a good smooth dough, I was talking about, you could see the oil before, there was kind of like bits that were yellow, there were bits that had a bit of yeast, a bit that had a bit of excess water. Once it kind of all looks the same color, it's starting to kind of look a bit smooth, like this. That's when you want to make sure that you've done that first test. So bring it into a nice tight ball, or do the way that I did it that first time, where you smush it out and you bring all your edges in like a dumpling, because that also will create that tightness and give it a good push. I'm happy with that.
So we've had a question from the audience. So what would you do if your dough is too sticky at this point, Maddie?
If your dough is too sticky at this point, you're going to take, if it's sticky enough that your hands are covered in dough, you no matter what you do, I would say start with 2 tablespoons of flour. You're going to shake it onto your dough and basically smush it all out. Do that fold in kind of thing, but then bring it all together and then continue that kneading process, because that will get the flour in there the quickest. But remember, it will eventually come in together, but we want a nice strong dough so that it holds the structure of the pizza. So I will say start with, I've got about 4, 5, 6 tablespoons of flour here. If you start with about half that amount, just to start, remember to clean off your hands as well, because sometimes the dough is only sticky because your hands are sticky. It's not necessarily that the dough is quite sticky, it's only sticky because it's sticking to your hands. So think about giving your hands a quick clean, just to make sure it's not your fault, it's the dough's fault. And then make sure that you're adding not too much flour, because then you've got to add that little bit more water. So go incrementally with your flour as well. And when you get to this nice smooth ball, if you're a bit worried, if you have a rough looking ball but it feels like it's got a good bounce to it, you can use that as well. This time around, because it is pizza, so we're not creating a loaf, we don't need too much spring. It doesn't have to be completely tight, but it does need to be smooth, at least at a bare minimum. So if you're worried about getting into that really tight ball, it should at least be bouncy, and it should at least be smooth, and all those ingredients are within that ball, yeah? How are we going so far? Have you just got your hands covered in dough? I feel like that's where we're at.
Flour,
yeah, absolutely. Do feel free, if you really need to, go and give your hands a good wash as well. Again, a little bit of oil, a little bit of flour as you need it. I'm going to pop this in the oven that Millie so kindly put that boiling water in, and what she's also going to be so kind and pour some oil in the bowl.
Am I? Okay.
Yes. That little bit of oil in the bowl, if you've got any left in your cup, just stick it upside down as well. It will just help not to stick, and it will help us later on when we're pushing out. And like I said, you could get a tea towel or a dinner plate to cover that. Don't let it dry out in your oven, because it will crack on top. So that tea towel or the plate is going to keep all the moisture inside and let that yeast start to activate.
Just a dinner plate, nothing too fancy, or a damp tea towel.
Or a damp tea
one,
towel.
please. And Into the oven it goes, nice and steamy.
If you haven't put your boiling water in at this stage, put that in now and you'll see it's going to create a nice warm atmosphere for your little baby dough there.
So because we have it, I'm using antibacterial sanitizer, but if not, just use some soapy water and wipe down your bench so you don't have any yeast. Keep it nice and clean and give your hands a really, really good wash.
Particularly your cuticles. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you've got dough in your nail cuticles, give it a really good scrub now, because remember, it's a fungus and it thrives at body temperature.
I feel like I'm going to wash my hands now.
Yeah. And then, next step, you have your dough. It's sitting in your oven at a good temperature, not too hot. You don't want it to be you don't want it to be over 40 degrees, that's for sure, because just like a lot of things, it thrives at body temperature, but it also dies, let's say over 45 to 50 degrees. So you don't want to kill your yeast, you just want to make it happy, I think is probably a good term for it. And 35 degrees is a really good time for that. And so now we are moving on to our tomato sauce.
Yes, and just a quick reminder, our oven is still off. This is kind of acting as the proving function, if you will. So just creating that nice warm environment where the yeast can quickly grow.
Thank you. Thank you. And basically what will happen is we're going to take the dough out later on and immediately crank it to the highest heat to then cook that pizza later on. So I'll tell you, hopefully when we take our dough out, I'll remind you just to crank it right up after that. But for now, it's off, dead.
Right, so just a little refresher onto our killer tomato sauce if you missed it earlier in the week. So we're going to start with one large white onion. I'm going to cut through the middle, overarching my fingers so they're not getting in the way, because it's quite a hard thing to cut sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I've gone through the roots, this is the tip, and we've got our little scrap bowl for any bits of onions. So I'm just peeling off any dry layers of skin until I get down to nice white onion. So what we're going to do tonight is a dice. Tonight it doesn't have to be super smooth, but it's it's nice to practice your knife skills. We'll do sort of medium chop.
Medium chop.
So I've got my handy Jeffrey. He's scraping my knife for me. He's picking up my board, all the onion skins, and then now I'm going to chop off the top, not the roots. That can go in my bowl. And I'm just going to do nice cuts along my onion, and I'm slightly angling it, but I'm using the tip of the knife as my guide.
Keeping your fingers out of the way. Yeah.
And I'm squishing the onion together for those last few pieces to hold it. And that is still in one piece, nothing's falling apart. And then rotate it 90 degrees and continue to do my dice. Need a bigger knife, it's quite a big onion.
It's quite a big onion. I've reached the end of my onion, and if it gets unstable towards the end, you're going to flip it down to that flat side, always trying to work as safe.
Cuts around.
And just chopping to the root there. And no, we do not want this bit in our sauce. So anything that looks like that can go into your stockpile or your food compost at home.
So this is going to go into our cold pan with some cold oil. No sizzling hot pans to start. Or you just throw it all over the bench.
Or you can throw it all over the bench. Luckily we've got Jeffrey here to support us.
My emotional support,
Have we
Jeffrey.
introduced Jeffrey?
Not
today?
Officially.
Okay, for those of you who are listening to us say
debut.
Jeffrey and have no idea what's going on, we call this piece of plastic Jeffrey because he is our best friend. He's always here to support us. He clears off our benches. He safely takes off any onions or anything that's on our knife. Definitely not using our fingers. Jeffrey's there to clean up after us, as he so keenly demonstrated before when Millie threw her onion everywhere.
So, into the pan with some olive oil or rapeseed oil if you don't have it, but olive oil has lovely flavour.
And at this stage, everything is still cold, so we do not have our heat on. We've got cold oil, cold onions, and the heat is still not on.
With a pinch of salt to draw out the moisture and also help with the browning. So now I can put it on to full heat. Give it a little toss to make sure all the onions are coated evenly in the oil. And then I'm going to let it sit. I'm not going to get impatient and be stirring it this whole time. Ooh, sorry. because it won't do anything. It'll just stir fry, you'll get pieces of white onion. And what I want is for this to get really jammy and brown and caramelized because it has a lot more flavor. And it'll add some sweetness to our sauce, so you won't need to add extra sugar. So make sure it's all coated, and then it's going to sit.
Forget about it.
Forget about it, exactly.
Momentarily.
So moving on, we're going to add a couple more aromatic things. We've got garlic, got dried oregano, fresh parsley, and sun-dried tomato paste.
Sun-dried tomato paste, nice and
So we're
rich.
going to prep those things whilst our onions are browning. So just keep an ear out, so listen for any aggressive sizzling. So if you start hearing like a big snap, crackle, pop, have a look at your stove, see if there's any browning on the bottom of the pan, give it a little, it's just started.
It's just started.
Give it a little scrape down and make sure that nothing is burning, but also it's getting good colour, and then we will start doing our
Stirring every now and
toasting.
again.
So grab your garlic cloves. If you have a garlic crusher, you can use that, or you can just do it with a knife.
I'm trying my best to do everything with Jeffrey.
If you've got slightly sad garlic, you can just trim off any bad bits.
And the easy way to peel it is chopping off that dry bit at the end. I crush mine with my Jeffrey. I'm finding new uses for him all the time. This garlic is atrocious.
So, you're doing
Crush,
it again.
crush, crush. If you do this now, and you crush it now, half your job is done. I don't have to do anything.
So just coming back to our pot, I can hear the sizzle. Hopefully you can as well, but it's still like completely clean on the bottom. So again, just gonna let it sit, do its thing, and we can come back to our garlic.
At this stage, we're not going for a full chef chop. We're just putting our hands on top, and we're just going that back and forth, that kind of pizza cut, just to make it small enough so that it will distribute evenly.
Just melt into the sauce.
Yeah, just enough for the sauce to distribute quite there. I'm just going back and forth, pulling all those big bits into the center as you need it.
So it's starting to get a little bit of browning on the bottom. So give it one good stir. And shake the pan a little bit if you want to. Scrape down the edges, make sure that there's no onions left unturned. And then I'm going to let it sit, and I'm going to be patient. I'm not going to repeatedly stir it so it's not stir frying. So in the meantime, still working on our garlic. It's fine chop.
One thing that we do say for tomato sauce, and actually all our recipes you'll see, is we are not going to put this garlic in now because it will immediately burn. So we want our onions 100% cooked, and then the garlic is just going to go in for 10 seconds just until you can smell it, and then we're going to add all those other ingredients on top. So have your tomato sauce and your sun-dried tomato paste or your tomato puree, whatever you may be using, nearby, because we don't want our garlic to burn. We want it to just get aromatic or fragrant, or basically so that you can smell garlic, and then everything else goes in just to stop that cooking process, make sure it's not burning. It's quite bitter. If you take your garlic too far, kind of ruins all the sweetness that you've just been creating with your onions.
So if I move everything out of the way, you can see you're starting to get this browning building up on the bottom. We're going to give it a good stir. If you're getting any browning that is veering towards burning, add a splash of water, and that's called deglazing, but all that means is you're just lifting off the caramelization on the bottom of the pan, and you're transferring it onto your onions. They'll start browning a lot quicker this way. You don't need to spend hours on a slow cooker with your onions sweating out slowly, and 10 hours later you've got brown onions. You can do it really quickly, in fact, if you just are a little bit patient and let them sit. So now it's starting to get a little bit brown on the bottom. I'm just going to add a splash of water, literally a teaspoon. Standing back if you've got a lot of steam, and you can see instantly the bottom of the pan is clean, and the onions look a lot browner because all that browning has transferred off the bottom of the pan.
Looking good.
So
we're going to, now the last ingredient that we do need to prepare for this, so we've got our sun-dried tomato paste or tomato puree, we've got this ready to go. We're just going to chop up some lovely fresh parsley. I'm going to give some to Millie.
thank you.
I'm going to keep some for myself. Parsley is just a really lovely way to transfer a little bit of flavour with a reasonably accessible herb that you can kind of have bopping about all the while.
And you can just keep any of these quite thick stalks for your stock bag that you may have on hand by now.
Yeah, if you've been cooking with us since Monday, you definitely have a good stock bag going. You don't want too thicker pieces, but a little bit of thinner parsley stalks is fine to chop up. I'm going to basically roll everything into a nice little tight ball, just because it's easier to chop like that basically. So keep your fingers out of the way, chop. I'm just going to go 3 this way and then kind of bring it back together and do that same motion that I was doing with the garlic as well, just back and forth, keeping all the big bits in the center if you need them.
So by now your house should be smelling pretty amazing. Smelling pretty good here. Got that lovely fresh parsley smell, the caramelized onions, smelling very, very sweet and herby in here. So hopefully you guys are all at a similar point to us. If you're not, don't worry, just rewind and watch back the episode a little bit later and you'll catch up on any tips and tricks that we have. So your dough should be proving, your onions are browning, your parsley is chopped or chopping, and your garlic is ready to go in, and you've got your tin of tomatoes nearby. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to our onions. They're getting quite brown. And you just want to see the bottom of your pot getting cleaned up. So there's still quite a lot of stuff that I can't quite scrape up on my own. A little bit more water. Give it a really good scrape. Quite steamy, so watch your hands. And those quite quickly have gone very, very dark brown. With not that much effort, just high heat and a little bit of patience. And I'm really scraping the pot quite hard. I don't want to leave it on the bottom where it's just going to burn, so you might as well give it a really good scrape. And I'm watching this quite carefully now because it gets to a certain point where the sugars are being pulled out and they will caramelize quite quickly. So at the start it wasn't really doing anything for a little while, but now it's going much quicker.
And another person that's handy is if you have your handy Maddie on hand to chop your parsley for you. I highly recommend one.
So I'm happy with the stage our onions are at. We also want our sauce to be ready in time for our pizza dough.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Get your garlic in. Gonna just toast that until fragrant, so just until you can smell it. 10 seconds, maybe 5-10 seconds. That smells. So,
smells good.
Sun-dried tomatoes going in as well. So
all of that rich goodness.
And then we can add in our dried oregano and our tomato paste. So that's all going in together. Ooh. And not the lid.
And not the lid. Unless you like the taste.
So Maddie's going to rinse the...
Ma'am. Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Maddie's going to rinse the tin out for me. So I'm going to add in some water so it's nice and saucy. It's got enough liquid to actually cook and not just get really brown on the bottom.
Yeah, if you...
You can hear it's very, very dry and it needs to be saucy, otherwise it's not tomato sauce.
Exactly.
So, and that's going to lift off any extra browning I have on the bottom. Ooh. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit because it's splashing everywhere and I want my clean apron.
We want to continue our clean apron party. Yep.
So give it a good stir. Scrape off any bits on the bottom. And then that's just going to simmer until we're ready to use it.
I'm going to quickly check on the dough because I believe it's going to be close to ready. At this stage...
and our parsley, sorry.
And our parsley. Oh, sorry, Millie. I'm interrupting you.
Last but not least.
Very rude.
And that is our sauce almost finished. As long as we've seasoned it at the end, that is ready to go once it's reduced a little bit and the raw tomato flavour has cooked out of the sauce. So, back to team dough.
Back to team dough. Now is a good time. I'm going to check the dough, but get yourself any toppings. We've got some mozzarella, we've got some olives, anchovies. If you have any kind of sad looking basil, we won't cook it, but we will put it on after. I don't think we have any. We don't have any sad basil or any happy basil, but we do have some dried oregano. We do have some lovely olives and some anchovies, which I love particularly. So we're going to absolutely coat our pizza, some nice cheeses. It's also a good way to get rid of any weird bits and bobs you've got in your fridge. If you've got any cold meats lying about, if you've got any odds ends of your cheeses, but also any like roast pumpkin is quite nice, or butternut. If you've got any roast aubergine kicking about as well, that can go on top. It's a free-for-all from now.
Yeah, lots of... But yeah, whatever you like. You can even have a very plain pizza. We won't judge you. But
exactly.
It is essentially just bread with something on top, baked in a very, very hot oven. So as simple as it can be, it doesn't need to be fancy or have a million ingredients. So how's it looking?
It's looking all right. So it needs a little bit of movement. Ooh.
Very steamy.
Ours is quite wet and steamy, but you can kind of see the bubbles are starting on the bottom there. So we're going to give that maybe another 5-10 minutes. It does need to grow up to about here. Once it gets warm, it moves really, really, really quickly. So I'm going to pop that one back in, and we're going to organize all our bits and bobs to go on top. I'm going to check my other one. What have we got? We have...
So we've got some lovely anchovies, we've got some black olives.
Got some dried
Fresh.
oregano. You can get your tray for your pizza ready as well, because this one has not looked. Oh. And then, last but not least, the cheese.
Pièce de résistance. So we've got just some fresh mozzarella. We just drained it, so it's not too watery. You got
The
tray?
tray's under the dishwasher.
Great. So our sauce is bubbling pretty rapidly, so we can even turn it down a little bit because it doesn't need to reduce too quickly. The more time you have to do the sauce, the better. You can have it on a low simmer for a little bit. And you can make a double or triple batch, as we said before, and freeze it. It reheats beautifully, and it's nice to make just one big batch rather than having to do a little bit each time. It's much more energy efficient and time efficient.
I'm just having momentary oven problems.
Aha.
Am I? Yes, we're good. We're good. We're happening. Okay, sorry. Just having momentary oven problems. So we've got this one started. We're going to get our ingredients for our pizza ready, but like I said, the dough needs a little bit more time. So in the meantime, we're just going to prepare our salad. We've got a simple one tonight, but again, salad is whatever you want it to be, basically.
You can do the lettuce.
I can do the lettuce, can I? Thank you very much.
So what we have is English cucumber. We've got some cos lettuce and baby gem.
Baby
But
gem.
Any lettuce or green salad is great. It's nice and fresh to go with our rich tomato sauce and our lovely doughy pizza. And then we will have our bright dressing. So where's my knife gone?
Yeah,
You
I
stop
have
it.
it for you. So I'm going to...
And you can add peppers to this.
What else is nice?
We will also add some green olives. So just something nice and fresh, crunchy, nice contrast to our pizza.
Yeah. Are you going to show them how to cut the cucumber the way you like it?
Sure.
Yeah. Or am I going to?
Ladies first.
Let's start with lettuce. If you've got any weird bits, maybe not in the salad, you can save that for grilling later. But just pull off all the best bits of your lettuce, and we're going to give it a really good rinse.
So we've got a salad spinner here, but you can wash it in like a big bowl with lots of cold water.
Yes,
very
not
important.
warm.
And if you have leaves that are a little bit limp, it will also revive them because often they've just dehydrated in your fridge a little bit. So bowl of cold water, give it a good wash. Dump as much water as you can at that point, and you can put it into a tea towel and pat it dry if you don't have a salad spinner. Yeah. But we do have one tonight.
We do have one tonight, so we're going to be
won't make
doing
our life
that.
too difficult.
And we've got 2 small ones. That will be plenty for us tonight. If you can eat a whole lettuce, I'll be very happy with you. You can always add more for anything that you need. If you don't have a salad spinner, you can dry it. What was it?
With the tea towel.
With a tea towel. With a tea towel. All right.
You can even shake it like that, but that's a bit chaotic. So only do that if you've got a little bit of outdoor space.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, I've got my lettuce ready. I'm going to give this a very quick rinse in very cold water. And I think do use a lot of water, particularly if you find you've got lots of dirt on your lettuce. It's not a great way to eat salad. We want it to be very, very clean, but also very, very dry.
So whilst Maddie is doing that, I'm going to start with our cucumber. You can just trim off the ends. If you want to, you can peel it, but it's not really necessary. These have quite thin skin compared to those sort of prickly looking cucumbers. So I'm going to start by cutting it down the middle. So keep your fingers either side of the blade and just gently draw it through. Now you've got 2 flat pieces. So we're going to de-seed ours. It just prevents too much water being in our salad. So I'm going to, sorry, Maddie. I like a teaspoon to do this because it's kind of roughly the right width. So, not quite separated. And just scrape along. You'll get a nice cucumber facial when it's back. A
little bit on your eyes, a little bit of a relax.
You can just scrape all the way down. And then we're going to cut little half moons from it.
And while you're doing your favourite job, I'm going to do my favourite job, which is spinning the lettuce like crazy. If you have a salad spinner, it's definitely the funnest job for making salad. Not that I don't love cutting cucumber. And you just let it go. Let it go.
And you can see all the water's just being spun out of the basket, gathering in the bottom. You might have to do this once or twice.
Depending on...
Or even 3 times. It's much nicer to have dry salad than it is to have horrible wet soggy leaves. So
yeah,
worth
and the
doing
other
a few
thing that
times.
the excess water does is it just dilutes your dressing. So instead of eating the lovely dressing that we'll make later on that's oil and acid, you're actually kind of eating a watered down version of it, which is nowhere near as tasty, and it won't catch as well on the lettuce if there's excess water there. So we're looking for super, super dry lettuce. I've done my favorite job well. My lettuce is super dry, so I'm actually really happy. You can see so much water came off there in the end. And we're gonna make this our lovely salad bowl.
Yeah, that dressing is going to stick so much better when those leaves are dry. And you can see just from scooping out the seeds how much water is left on my chopping board. It's literally dripping with it. So that's why good idea to remove those seeds, get ahead of that, just like we did with our, might even
use your Jeffrey. Very
use my
nice.
Jeffrey, just because I can.
Just because you can.
Loads and loads of water coming off that.
And the best salads always you can eat with just a fork. So ideally you're kind of making everything we're always talking about bite-sized pieces, but similar sizes. So instead of adding all your whole leaves, these ones will be ripped up into trying to match the bite-sized pieces. So you should be able to pick it up with your fork.
This is going to slot
easily.
quite nicely into that. It's a nice bite.
Yeah, so these bigger pieces will probably go in half, even bigger than that into thirds.
And you can
just
tear
tearing.
them.
Yeah,
Doesn't
you
need
don't
to
need
be
a
too
knife. It doesn't
fussy.
need to be beautiful. It's kind of a bit more natural looking as well instead of a super sharp salad. But I'm just breaking these up, and this is going to be our nice salad bowl at the end there.
So we are already 40 minutes in. I can't believe every night we say it, and it is still true.
It's still so true.
It has flown by, so I think we're going to get back to our dough in a second, just so that
and
we've got that ready to go in the oven.
we're going to take our doughs out. I'm going to have a look at those bubbles, and then we are going to pop our oven onto the highest possible heat. Unless for some reason you have a magic oven that goes to 400, that might be a little bit too high. It's not quite a wood fire.
So I've been doing a couple of different slices, whatever feels more comfortable for you. So you can go push with the tip, like that. You can drag back. Everything is fine as long as your fingers are curled back. You can just straight up and down. You can experiment with different slicing styles, see what feels more comfortable for you. Just as long as your fingers are out the way, I don't mind, we won't judge you.
As long as you're safely cutting, everything else is fine. I'm going to move this one over here, Mel.
So, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
So that's almost all our salad prepped. Our olives, we've just got nice big green olives. They're just going to go in whole. Add a little bit of tang as well. Right,
Let's get these doughs out. Have a look at what they're doing.
So whilst Maddie's checking her dough, my sauce is getting quite dry, which is good. It means it's reducing, but I'm just going to stir it, make sure nothing is sticking on the bottom.
All right, so I'm getting myself ready with that little bit of excess flour. I've got my dough. Sprinkle a little bit on your bench. It can also be oil, by the way. And we're just going to flip that baby out and see all those little bubbles on the bottom of the bowl. You can, I don't know how good the sound is, but you can almost hear them. That's why I said the glass bowl is best. It should, trying for double in size, at least 1.5, the growth. Think about how small your dough was to start with, and I can hear those little bubbles. The good thing is, at this stage, we want to be pretty mean. We want to push the most of those bubbles out, because every dough that you kind of make, you really want to be having 2 proofs. So the first proof was in that bowl. That's where all these bubbles are. But the second proof is going to be in whatever shape you want it to be. So we're going to fold this. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It's just getting it into a shape that's a bit more what we want it, because we are going to make a rectangle pizza basically. So I folded mine into a rectangle. And the other thing is, at this stage, you can be mean. You don't have to be gentle. I'll tell you when you have to be a little bit nicer with the dough. But at this stage, this is going straight on that tray. You can oil your tray. You could use paper, you feel like. I'm actually going to ask my good friend Millie to drizzle a little bit of olive oil.
Oh, excuse me.
And here we're going to be gentle, just so that we don't shred it. I'm using my fingers and I'm trying to encourage it. I'm not pushing down and smearing so that there's a big hole, but we are trying to flatten it out. So if you can see, I'm almost using all of my hands. They've got a little bit of oil, a little bit of flour, and I'm just pushing it until it's quite flat. If you want it to be circle at this point, you're going to fold it into a little circle to start. But we're making a big family-sized pizza, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more economic, because you can feed, at this one, you can see this is a good 8-slice kind of pizza. And I'm kind of trying to keep it in a rectangle, but the other thing that I'm doing is just making a tiny ridge on the outside, and that will be your crust. So this center point is going to be where we'll put all our fillings, and this is going to be our nice thick crust. I was talking about that second proof, or the second proof that the yeast is alive, the second round of bubbles. The amount of time that we allot for that kind of depends on what you're making. This is extremely flat, and this is a very warm kitchen. So basically, by the time we've put our tomato sauce is going to be a little bit warm.
Give this a little try.
Yeah, we're going to give it a try. By the time you put all this on, it will actually be proved to that second round. If you've got a big loaf, it's obviously going to take a little bit more, maybe like 40 minutes in a nice warm area. But because this is so flat, it's going to move very quickly. Now is a good time, crank that oven up, high. We're going to pop ours on 300 straight away.
So, Maddie, would you recommend keeping the tray of water in at this point or taking it out?
You do need to take that tray, or particularly if you're using a bowl as well, everything out of your oven before you crank it up, because it's going to create a lot of steam, and that water will actually start to smoke if you don't take it out now. So take that out, clear your oven, get your bits and bobs around you. We are going to quickly taste our tomato sauce to make sure it's got that really nice caramelized onion flavor, a little bit of salt as well, which I will ask you to do, my friend, because I have doughy hands. And we've got all our bits and bobs. We've got a little bit of everything. So we're going to quickly taste this just to see if it's delicious. I'm sure it's close.
The sun-dried tomato paste does have a little, it's like slightly salty. So it wasn't that far off when I tried it. I think it just needed like a pinch
pretty close.
More salt maybe. So I'm going to put it into my hand so it doesn't jump out into the pan and suddenly I've gone too far and have to scoop it out. So just pinch. 2 pinches.
2 pinches?
Give it a good stir so it's thoroughly dissolved. And at this point, if you had a little bit more time, you can let this sauce cool down fully.
But we're going to go.
So yeah, we're 3/4 of the way through our cook, so we are so nearly ready for this to go in the oven. As soon as it's hot, really, we will be putting it in. And yeah.
I think my advice for your pizza is usually more is less. I know everyone loves cheese, I know everyone loves tomato sauce, but unless you have a perfect wood fire oven at home, it's going to be quite hard to cook the underneath of your pizza. So don't drown it with sauce, don't drown it with fillings, and it will make it crispy, or make sure that everything's cooked evenly, yeah?
Yeah, do you mean less is more?
What did I say? Did I say more is less?
I was thinking that.
I do mean less is more. Shock.
What an interesting
I know. What an interesting turn of phrase. I came up with that one all by myself.
That's a good one.
Less is more, not more is less. We don't want to be creating a soggy pizza. We want it to be able to cook evenly. And like I said, the tomato sauce is warm, but because we're not putting too much on, it won't affect it, and it will actually even just help that proving process a little bit. So here we are. We've got a nice amount, not too much. I'm just going to go that little bit more, and of course we've got a little bit excess. This can be frozen easily. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
Freezing it, you can use it for any other things. It's a great pasta sauce, sorry. This is a kind of a very good base sauce to have in your freezer for a million different things.
I think we should put a bit more sauce on.
Oh, I'm thinking about it. I'm just spreading that out just to see what we're working with. But again, we don't want it to be sloppy. We're just going that. Think about if I was talking about.
It's quite well reduced. So actually, we've only had that on for about 20-25 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's reduced down a lot. So
a lot.
Because we use a slightly wider pan than we did the other night when we were doing pasta sauce, a lot more liquid has evaporated off. So it's not quite as sloppy as it was then.
Think
but
about
it's like
your
nice and thick.
friends and family when you're doing this. So don't put all your portions in one side of the pizza. All right, let's go. We're going to go If you know me, I hope you realize I love olives, so we're going olives absolutely everywhere. We're going to tear up our mozzarella because this one spreads quite well. So I'm going to take half. Yeah, let's go. Look at that. This one spreads quite well.
So just nice big fat pieces of mozzarella. It's going to puddle. It's going to look gorgeous when it comes out the oven.
And last but not least, a few little bits of anchovies.
Last but not least.
Last but not least.
If you have some and you like the flavour of it, you can add some dried oregano. Just sprinkle it from. You can sprinkle it from quite high up, and then you'll get nice even distribution. And that goes the same with salt or any seasonings that you have. Just a little higher up, and it won't be like a big clump on one piece of mozzarella.
I'm only putting anchovies in half, just in case somebody doesn't like them. And then here we go. We're going in a nice hot oven. 15 minutes, let's say, for a big pizza like this. 15 minutes, you're looking for a good rise on your edge and nice golden colours all the way around. And I'm just going to give my hands a wash now.
So if you've been touching yeast, remember to just give your hands a really, really good wash and wipe down your counters if they've been on your countertop. Soapy water or antibacterial spray is really good for this. Just kills any of the yeast spores. So now your pizza is in the oven, you can start to relax. We've still got 1 or 2 more things to do, but nearly there. We're on the home stretch.
Alrighty. Sorry, man. And so you can grab your ingredients for that dressing that we were talking about earlier. So this is a pretty simple Italian style dressing. So we've got really nice balsamic vinegar. We've got really good quality olive oil as well. We've got a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of garlic, but as always, we are going to taste to perfection. You don't want to have it too oily, you don't want to have it too acidic, and that is Millie's specialty. Is it? Yes, it is.
So you want a sort of trifecta. You want acid, fat, and salt, and you don't want anything vying for attention. You want everything to be nicely balanced, so you've got a little bit of sweetness from the vinegar as well. So on Tuesday night, I think it was, we did an apple cider vinegar dressing. So I was saying apple cider vinegar is quite sweet. Balsamic also has a little bit of sugar, so a little bit sweeter than something like white wine vinegar. But for now, we're going to add in some garlic. So I've got a garlic crusher. If you've got quite a powerful one, you don't even have to peel it. You can just pop it in. This one is not the best one, so I'm going to just very quickly peel it.
This dressing is quite a simple one. This is called a balsamic. It doesn't have any mustard in it. That's kind of a different variety of dressing or a different flavour as well. The mustard is a bit more of an emulsion, very thick, whereas this one is quite a simple dressing. So no, we won't put any mustard in it. It's just a different dressing altogether.
So if I can...
There we go. That's a very big garlic clove.
It's
actually going everywhere.
Sorry.
There we go.
Using my Jeffrey to scrape off my garlic crusher. So this is going to give us a quick whisk. And that's going to go into my olive oil. So usually the ratio for dressing is 1:3 or 1:4. So that's 1 part vinegar to 4 parts or 3 parts oil. And play around with it. If you find that it's way too vinegary for you, add a bit more oil. And all you're doing is just making a bit more dressing if you're adjusting the seasonings.
Ooh.
If it's too salty, add a little bit more vinegar and a bit more oil. Too oily, add more vinegar. So it's a triangle. You're just trying to make sure that everything is in balance. Yeah. So I'm whisking that well. And the garlic will help hold the ingredients together a little bit as well. So you see, if I whisk it a lot, ooh,
very good.
It will start to clump together. But if I let it sit, it will settle again, which is absolutely fine. That's just a part of homemade dressing. So,
and
salt.
Just before, I'm going to say tonight we made one big pizza. That's a big family feeder. But if you've got people who don't have same interests at heart, they don't love anchovies, you can of course divide that dough as many. You could make tiny pizzas, just make sure they're really, really nice and flat. But that particular dough, the recipe that we made, I would say would make 4, 5, even 6 kind of good sized individual pizzas. If everybody wants to do their own separate toppings, you would do that same thing, just kind of take off a chunk of dough, encourage it into a circular shape, and then just top from there, but always trying to keep that base or the center of it really nice and thin and making sure it's not shredded or wholly. So yeah.
What I added was some black pepper and some salt. Again, I didn't want to go with the full amount of salt just in case we needed to dial it back a little bit. So we're going to do the all-important taste test. And what I've got here is just another little whisk. This is called magic whisk. It's quite good for dressings, but you could just use a fork. You can even stick blend this if you want a thicker, creamier dressing, because it uses the garlic to really hold all the little particles of oil and vinegar together. So, tasting time. I'm going to stir it while we're tasting it, because otherwise you might get a layer of oil and not that much vinegar, and you're not really getting an accurate read on how salty or vinegary it is. So give it a really good stir so that the salt is really dissolving in the liquid, and then try it.
I'm just going to quickly introduce something that we do here all the time at Cookery School. We cook for a lot of people all the time, which means that we want to create our food that's tasty, which is why we're tasting it in the first place, but also hygienic. And if you're cooking for a lot of people, it's just a good habit to get into at home, is we have this tasting bowl. And so every time we taste something, you would have seen us having a taste. Delicious.
1 spoon, 1 dip.
Delicious. 1 spoon, 1 dip. And then this bowl for us means we know that these spoons are dirty and that they've been in somebody's mouth, they've got saliva on them. Yeah. So it's a good habit, and we do try to encourage it at home, particularly if you're cooking for a lot of people, to just have a handful of spoons, and every time you do taste something, just get rid of it. Don't double dip, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
When you're cooking for that big buffet in summer.
Yeah.
Taste hygienically.
Taste hygiene.
So I hope you have got to the stage where you have your dressing in front of you. Give it a taste. I hope it's as delicious as ours. Ours needed a tiny, tiny bit of salt. So just going to add, that was maybe 2 small pinches. Give it a quick mix so it's dissolved. You can try it again at this point. If you're happy with it, just set it aside. And you can put this in a jar. You can even make it in a jar if you want to. Make it in your jar, give it a good shake to emulsify it. And it can stay in that jar in your fridge for a couple of days. It has got raw garlic in it, so don't keep it forever. But it's good to make a little batch of it, bring out every night with your salad. Perfect. So,
good.
We have
a few
more minutes left. So how's our pizza doing?
It's not doing too bad. Like I said, our pizza's nice and high. It really shouldn't be taking too long at all. I'm going to take it out just to give you a brief show. I'll give it a quick rotate and then we'll take it out in a few more minutes. But you can see our cheese has started to melt. We've got this golden layer on the side here, and our oven is quite front hot, so I'm actually going to rotate it to make sure it gets a bit more heat. And then once it's got that golden color there, all the way up to here, your mozzarella is melted. If you have a huge pizza, I recommend sliding something underneath. It doesn't necessarily have to be golden brown on the bottom, but you do have to be able to pick it up off the tray. That will let you know that there's no raw dough on the bottom there.
So, Maddie, how much longer would you say our pizza needs to cook for?
So, our pizza, that monstrosity there, if you've got it on about 300 like we have, maximum 10 minutes. It shouldn't be, if you've got a really nice hot oven, you should be kind of looking for like about 15, 20 minutes. If you've got a lower, maybe you're down at 200, 220 or something like that, you're going to be more like 20, 25 minutes. It also depends on the size of your pizza. So obviously we did quite a large one. If you've got smaller ones and you've got a really hot oven, maybe 10 to 12, maybe kind of coming up to that 15-minute mark. But you are looking for, you should have definitely at least a golden crust all the way around. And checking the bottom is a good way to say if whatever you're sliding underneath slides all the way through, it's cooked onto the tray as well, so that's a good way to check there's no raw dough anywhere. But you want to make sure that the heat has kind of hit every single part of that. Particularly if you've got lots of little ones together, don't put them all onto one tray really close, separate them out. They'll cook way more evenly as well and take a lot less time to cook.
I think you'll smell it. You'll know it is begging to be eaten. You'll have that crispy cheese. It'll be like our macaroni last night. So you have that golden bubbly crust. So I know we bang on about caramelization, but it happens across so many delicious things. Most things that are golden brown are tasty. So our crispy cheese, our baked pasta, our golden bread, our roasted veggies, our onions. So we do bang on about it, but it is the basis of a lot of what we think is the most flavorful at Cookery School. So
I'm going to bring in a personal tag here. If you've got beautiful, crunchy, crisp salad like this, don't stress all of it. It will save much better and be much more appetizing the next day.
Keep it in your jar.
If you keep it in an airtight container and dress portion by portion. I think There's nothing sadder than having a wilty salad that's been drowned. So keep it, if you're not eating it straight away as well either, just keep it like this in your fridge and dress on your plate. So put that dressing on your plate as opposed to dressing this whole thing, and then you have that lettuce in the bottom that's been drowned and nobody wants to eat that the next day. So try and keep it all there. We're going to get
Sorry, I'm going to get some salad tongs quickly.
We're going to pop these green olives in. It's up to you, again, what you want in your salad. We've got cheese on our pizza, so it probably doesn't need cheese, just needs to be light, fresh and crisp. But all of these babies are going in. We're going to give it a little bit of toss. And for us, we're going to pour this beautiful dressing that Millie has made into a little pourer with a little spoon. I can see it's got heaps of garlic in there. We've got the world's largest garlic cloves.
So if you have a lot of lettuce in your fridge, something that Maddie and I are pretty obsessed with is grilled lettuce. It sounds really weird, but it is so delicious. It goes a little bit crispy, crunchy, and it's just such a good way to use up sad lettuce that is not... Ooh. Whoopsie. Try not to drown any individual leaves if you can. So I'm just going to give this a quick toss just so I've got a little bit of everything. I'm going to plate up my salad. You can pour on a bit of your dressing. But again, leave most of your salad undressed just in case you want to have it another night, and that way it's not going to be soggy and limp in the fridge.
Now, because it's Friday night, and I wouldn't do this any other night of the week, I'm serious, because you've got fresh dough coming out of the oven, the number one thing you have to do is just go like this, because it makes it look so beautiful. All those things that have dried out will kind of soak up that little bit of olive oil, give it a little bit of moisture. This, if you're at home, could take a couple more minutes. You can see it's a little bit pale here and a little bit pale up here, but this is pretty ready. You can see there's golden blisters on all of the cheeses, which means they've also taken heat. Underneath is going to slide off just like we talked about, which means there's no raw dough. I'm going to be able to, she says, oh yeah, there we go. Slide this all the way underneath. I can pick it up. That's a good, healthy pizza.
So we've just had a question about freezing dough. So we wouldn't really recommend it. It's just better to cook them fresh. And also the freezing can kill the yeast. So better to just use it.
It's a bit of a tricky process freezing the raw dough. To be honest, your best kind of thing to do would be to underbake this just slightly. Freeze the whole thing, and that's just not for pizza, that's for bread in general. So say you've got your little bread rolls or whatever you're doing. I think we're doing bread rolls on Monday. Undercook it just slightly, freeze it while it's fresh, so not the day after, and then defrost it, flash it in a really hot oven for 10 minutes, and it will be like you never froze it at all. It'll taste freshly baked.
Just like your supermarket pizzas, that's often what they do is they'll take it,
it's called
75% of
par
the way.
bake, partially baking something, 3/4 bake.
Slice.
Oh yeah, baby.
Are you a scissor or a knife person?
I'm going to do a dirty, and I'm going to cut straight into this.
So, once Maddie has done our slice...
Am I doing 2 slices, one for you as well?
That's all right.
That's very nice of me.
So, we just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us for another session. Once again, we've done so much in 1 hour. We've got our beautiful dressed salad. We've got dough that we've made in 1 hour and baked, which is fantastic. We've done our tomato sauce. So if you're feeling a little bit tired, pat yourself on the back, pour yourself a glass of wine, elderflower cordial, a beer, whatever you like. Kick back, enjoy your lovely pizza and salad.
Enjoy a homemade pizza. Well, look at that cheese. Look at those olives. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to eat this. And of course, a nice little balance, you know, with some salad.
But yes, thank you so much. We will see you again on Monday for another episode of
National Cooking Program.
So my name is Millie.
My name is Maddie, and please send your photos of your pizza at Cookery School London.
And it's National Pizza Day.
National Pizza Day. How could we forget? That's why we're making pizza in the first place, of course. We thought about it. We thought about it.
So yes, good night and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.